moi, je m'appelle Audrey.
My name is Audrey Maneteshain. I'm a research assistant from the Tahari Canton Sans Frontières. It's a network for Indigenous health research in Quebec. We'd like to begin the webinar by thanking all our panelists who have agreed to share with us and with you today the work that they do and their commitment to the field of research. We would like also to thank all the people who are here as participants, spectators, who are sharing interest in our fostering discussions on promising practices for research environments for and by the First Peoples. Just as a brief note about the ERRSA-Quebec, the network's name is Tahari Consententier, which means the faces of those who will come after us. Our mission is to be a research and training network in community mobilization and knowledge transfer in Indigenous health in Quebec. We aim to provide a space where Indigenous communities, elders, youth, researchers, and knowledge users can come together to promote health, community-centered participatory research, and training. We are currently located in Tihokye, unceded Kanien'kehá:ka territory, historically also frequented by the Anishinaabe Nation. However, as our viewers and panelists come from various places in the territory now called Quebec, it is important to remember that several Indigenous nations have traversed this vast territory for thousands of years through the paths they have taken and retaken on specific territories. They have developed a unique attachment to these lands, from which their skills, ways of being, knowledge, worldviews, and culture have emerged. We invite you to share in the chat the Indigenous peoples who have shaped the territory on which you are today. We welcome you. Oh, Lila, would you like to speak? Yes, Lila will take over. Hi, my name is Lila Cashew. I'm the director of ERRSA-Quebec. We welcome you at the first webinar of the series. It was practices in research in Indigenous context. Since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and the release of its calls to action, many individuals and groups have been working to decolonize a wide range of systems and environments, including research. While there is a growing interest in research partnerships with Indigenous peoples, these communities often remain objects of research and still face researchers who are ill-prepared today. In recent years, new requirements from the grant and scholarship programs, such as the obligation to include Indigenous groups, have resulted in an overburdening of communities, as well as Indigenous researchers and professors to seek their input, or contacts. On the other hand, researchers in academic settings often feel ill-equipped and unsupported in their efforts to develop equitable and beneficial relationships with First Peoples. They also face institutional requirements that do not meet the expectations and realities of their Indigenous partners. Furthermore, research conducted by Indigenous communities is unfortunately viewed with skepticism by the academic community, which sees it as non-rigorous and relegating it to gray literature. There are also limited funding opportunities for research conducted in non-institutional frameworks entirely by Indigenous communities and organizations, underscoring the importance of revising funding criteria. In this series, we will highlight research projects carried out entirely by Indigenous communities, organizations, and individuals. We will also present research partnerships between the academic community and Indigenous communities or organizations. Each presentation will detail the development of the research project and, if applicable, the partnership, the challenges encountered, and how they were overcome. The experience of the Indigenous organization or community in the research process, and the successes and outcomes perceived by them. I have the honor to present to you our first guest today, and her name is Jessie Lapage. and she's doing a master's in education sciences at Sherbrooke University, and she will speak to us about her project, her research project. I will leave Jessie, pass it to Jessie. Hello, everybody. I'm the member of the Pequot-Kinin from SCH. I'm very happy to be with you. That was in Elwayun, which is the dialect of my community, and also I think of Julie's. So I'm really happy to be here with you today to talk about my project that is called the so can you see, so the vocational training, testimonies of vocational training students, values, history, and cultural security. So I'm under the direction of Joanne Jonca from the University of Sherbrooke and Andréane Gagné, also from Sherbrooke University, members of the CRIFP, the Sierra, and the Observatory of the Professional Training, and also CIRCA. So let me start. So I would like to present you, just provide you project contextualization, because my project comes from another project, so it's important that you understand where this came from. Also, my personal motivations. I'm going to present to you my thesis statement, my theoretical framework, as well as my methodology. First, the project contextualization. So it comes from the promoting the professional training in the indigenous communities. We call it the FFPCA. So it's a developing research that is aiming to show the partnerships and document the partnerships between the professional center development centers that are in urban centers or in cities, and the CREACs, which are the centers. They're the centers, the professional training centers in the indigenous communities. So for those who are less familiar with professional training, to do professional training in the community, we call it delocalized professional training in communities. So we'll take like say a program, so like carpentry, that might be offered in the school board in Marie-Victorin, and we'll offer that in Kahnawake in the community and it's taught by members of the community if possible. So this project documents these partnerships, how they're going, and so on. And I come into this for the students who did take this training in the community. So it's really the part underneath that that is being documented, and is documenting what what their experience was for the students in that program. And at the end, when my project will be done, there will be an online training that will be developed for the community, the teaching community, for the professional training centers who want to document how to do things well, what needs to be put into place, what is important for the students, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, we're starting to prepare the online, to develop the online training, but there's still a lot of work to do. So for my project, my personal motivation, I have a bachelor's in professional teaching and professional training. It's much easier for me to integrate myself into this project. I'm also have put together a committee on the security, cultural security and health in First Nations and Inuit. So it's allowed me to work closer with Indigenous people and to understand better why education and health are important, why it must be adapted for those communities, and also Bill C-31, which has made it so that I got my status 4 years ago. I didn't have just a piece of paper, but I actually decided to to reappropriate my culture and to invest in my culture. It's important to me to work on behalf of the education of Indigenous people and with Indigenous people and in collaboration with non-Indigenous people. With regard to my thesis statement, so when we're doing a project in the Indigenous context, we cannot avoid talking about the Indian Act, which was an act that infantilized Indigenous people and has caused much damage and still causes much damage. So, and also the residential schools, this was used a lot to assimilate Indigenous people, and there are still many traumas that are being healed. And the link to education is important. But although we'd say that according to Statistics Canada, education is very important now for Indigenous people, for the First Peoples. There are also the different commissions, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There is the public relations. I'm forgetting the name of the commission, but that have made many calls to action that make us realize that even though it's not obligatory, it should be an obligation on the part of society. These calls to action should be. There's also the persistent gaps between non-natives and Indigenous people, even though there are more and more Indigenous people graduating with diplomas. There's still many persistent gaps between the two. There is still a large gap. So it's important that we feel this or shrink this gap. Regardless of this gap, despite this gap, Stats Canada is showing that it's in professional training, the gap is smaller and smaller, but there is not a lot of literature around that concerning this type of education, professional training, vocational training. And Statistics Canada also says that it's very popular in the Indigenous population because it has a high potential, and it's linked to it's very highly linked to traditional learning. It's not necessarily in classrooms with old style colonial classes. It's very technical. It's very hands-on. So it makes it so that these programs are more chosen by Indigenous population. Also, we're saying professional training, vocational training has a high potential to promote graduation among Indigenous people. So it's important to know what the students think about the professional training, vocational training also, how they experience that training, and there's not a lot of scientific literature that shows it doesn't show much because it's almost completely absent concerning the experience of the Indigenous student in the Quebecois world. It's vocational training's kind of put aside, and it's the same thing for the Indigenous students. So this is a vector of social justice. So it's important that for me that to do this project. With regarding to the general question around research, well, what is the impact of vocational training has on the lives of Indigenous people? And how will vocational training in Indigenous communities, how will it influence their educational life, and also how is it linked to their cultural security? So in terms of my research objectives, I want to document the impact of vocational training to relocated to original communities on students who have completed the training, better understand the lives of students in vocational training, and situate the relevance of cultural safety in vocational training. Just to share this quote from Sinclair, it's education that put us in this place, and it's through education that we will get out of it. And it's a premise that I always keep in mind. In terms of my theoretical framework, my primary research goal is the concept of the course. So the individual life course is supposed of a set of trajectories more or less intertwined, and referring to the different spheres in which the individual exists takes place: school, professional, family, associative, etc. And also in the school pathway, in the life pathway, there's two pathways related to education. So the school pathway is a sequence of situations and events that are carried out over a given period of time within the formal framework of the education system. And then there's the educational pathway, which is all educational experiences or events carried out in a given period of time, regardless of the place or context where the learning takes place. It reminds me a lot of the importance of the community and for Indigenous people to learn through the community, from the community, with the people in the community. So that is the concept, the primary concept of the research. So the model that I'm going to use is the systemic model of Manningham and et al., which takes into account aspects of the history of the first peoples of Quebec. So one of the differences, if you see on the image, there's an arrow that crosses from the middle of the diagram. So it includes the historic aspects. So all along, as we evaluate the exosystem and the mesosystem, all of the historic aspect passes through all of it, and we must always consider it's important that we always consider the historic aspects, and it affects a lot of Indigenous people's lives. It considers all that's important, values, community, family, teachers, and it takes into account the relational aspects between Aboriginal, Indigenous, and non-Indigenous people. It's important to see also, interesting to see also how this can affect the journey of the students in education. So with regard to my methodology, so it's a qualitative research because it's mostly around social sciences. So the trajectory of the Indigenous students is not well known. So it's important to have more literature, scientific literature on that. It will also make it easier to understand this social phenomenon. So the professional, vocational training, it's not in all communities, and what impact does it have on the students, or does it have an impact or not? So to understand that phenomenon, and also to understand and interpret the meaning that individuals attribute to their own lives, their experiences, their knowledge, and the complexity of the social sciences. This is from Gaudin Robert. So obviously, also it's an Indigenous-based research. So I want to use the Indigenous-based research guidelines. I know there are many. I took the 9 guidelines that Herman had published last year. So the research in an Indigenous context was done. They were used as guinea pigs. They weren't asked if they could do research. There were things that were done around practical knowledge. It was inappropriate and disrespectful. And now we can no longer do Indigenous studies research in that way. So it's important to me and my research team, which is a team of non-Indigenous, to follow those principles. He said that the research does not exploit or harm the community, in the hope that this research will promote Indigenous knowledge and values, as Herman said. So really to promote the traditional knowledge as well as the Western knowledge. So the aim is to decolonize the research methodology, and also decolonize research on the epistemological level, going according to the Etwap, which is the double perspective approach, and also to ensure the protection of intellectual property. Even if we're doing research for them, they decide whether or not we publish the results. So it's important for me to follow that, and even on a personal level. So in terms of the types of approaches, I have 2. The first is the interpretive approach to better understand the raw felt how it's in how the students have lived the experience as Indigenous students in a delocalized program with a teacher, with an Indigenous teacher or not, to know did the fact to not have a culturally adaptive program, did it make a difference? Did it change anything? So I want to describe sort of all of that. So for the interpretive approach, it is described, or not described so much, but it shows the significance that the people give to their own lives and experience, as well as on different readings they make of their worlds and the world. There's also a beautiful link between to the holistic concept that the First Nations value. They have a different view of the world, and there are dimensions, important dimensions. Like the holistic concept is a concept that is important. So when we use the interpretive approach, we can include those concepts in the methodological framework. Also, I join the decolonial approach in this approach. For one, that it allows me to position myself, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I want to reappropriate my culture. It is important for me to be able to mention that and to mention my perspective as researcher. We're not supposed to take part actively in what is happening in our research, but this approach allows us to do that a little bit. This approach also allows me to value Indigenous knowledge in scientific research, to show that it has as much pertinence as and importance as the Western knowledge, and also to participate in the decolonization of research. As I said earlier, my research team is non-Indigenous. The majority of the almost of all of the actors in the research project of this are non-Indigenous. So in order to not have a research that is tainted with knowledge and concepts that are Western said, it was very important to me to have an approach that was decolonized. So with regard to the collection of data, we have a group of heterogeneous Indigenous students, Anglophone, Francophone communities. It's really important to us because the different those different have different views. There are also communities that we are working closely with. They're in different geographic areas. So, in our opinion, that will allow a broader perspective in the results. So we're collaborating with the Inus of Pessamit, the Mi'kmaq of Listugush, the Ganyangahe de Ganawage, and the Anishinaabes of Sismosagigan. I think I made a mistake. Lac-Simon. And so for my methods of collecting data, so first, we haven't started yet the data collection. It will be according to a non-probability sampling. It won't be random, because we need people who took vocational training in Indigenous communities, or who are almost done doing that studying. Otherwise, we won't be able to answer the questions that the research is trying to answer. The students that will participate in this research have to represent the research objective, and it's also via the ERRSA. They will, it's with them that we will work. They will offer emails to the participants to find out if they're interested or not in this research. With regard to the tools for collecting data, so it's obviously important to respect Indigenous cultures and traditions. So I chose to do semi-structured interviews with established theme lists they're prepared according to the holistic dimensions of the medical circle in order to ensure that the participants can know where we are in the themes, and so that it covers all of the dimensions, important dimensions in the sharing circle, so that it's in harmony with those questions. The interviews will respect oral tradition, so no questionnaires, written no questionnaires, in order to remove the language barriers that might be there. Also, so that the participants feel at ease or comfortable, they are not confronted with the conflicting values where they might not feel safe. Also, we will be using the sharing circle or individual interviews. Why do we say or? Well, because the limits of research and the feasibility make it so that to do a sharing circle with 10, 15 students can be quite difficult. The new graduates or the students in training, they work, they're in class, they have families, so that for all those people to take the time at the same time, it can be quite difficult. So we've chosen also individual interviews for the feasibility and the limitations of research in an Indigenous context. It's not us that decides, we're letting the communities decide how they want to do it. So whether it be a sharing circle or individual interview, there will be a member of the community who will be with us. If the person wishes to speak in their traditional language, we will have someone who will be able to translate for us, so that we don't frustrate or exclude the participants, so that they're able to participate fully, and so on. So that's what I was saying with the feasibility. So that I'm done already. So thank you. And I'll be happy to answer your questions after Mike's presentation.
Merci énormément, Jessie, pour ta présentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Jesse. It is for the presentation. It is a very pertinent subject. There's not a lot of data, and it's also really very important to be able to contribute more information on Indigenous students. I also feel like it's very important and very touching that it's part of your own life journey of reaffirmation of your identity. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how your project develops and unfolds. I'm really happy that you're here with us today. Thank you.
So our next guest is another student. He's a student from McGill University. It's Michael Makwa Oxy. He's completing right now a doctorate in kinesiology sciences. I'm just gonna go find you, Mike, because we call him Mike. And he's been with us for a long time. He's one of the students that received one of our scholarships. So I'm really excited also to hear about what's going on with his research project. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay, so let's start with successful screen share deployment. All right. Audrey, give me a little thumbs up if you don't mind. I'm gonna close up the video in a sec. Yeah. Get my wits about me here. I want to make it so I can see more folks. Hang on. Okay, extend window. There we go. Yeah, it's always better. Okay, super. Well, I guess to start, I'm coming off and I'm actually in the midst of a very intense period. I'm submitting my thesis proposal formally on the 30th of this month, and this is the first of 2 talks I'm giving today, and I'm really excited for both of them. So thanks, everyone. Good gracious. Indians don't cry. Story weaving ice hockey from Lac Seul First Nation. praxis in Indigenous research. Make sure that notification didn't apply to me. My name is Mike Auxey. Makwa is my middle name. It's Bear in Anishinaabe Mowin. It's my clan. So it's my namesake, Makwa. And I'm a PhD candidate. My supervisor, Dr. Jordan Cook. Yeah, just excellent leadership from day one. Really thankful for my supervisor's mentorship and friendship. Yeah, so let's just get right to it, if I may, and slide. Okay, some guy named Mike. My dad had a dream that I was walking around Toronto and I was giving out subway metro tokens to youth, and I was taking youth to different sports programs and whatever. And my dad asked the kids, "Oh well, where'd you get your tokens? Like, who's the guy? Who's the social work educated fellow doing that?" And I thought some guy named Mike. Like, oh, okay. What tell me about him? Oh, he always wears a hockey jersey when he walks around. Like, yeah. So my dad was dreaming about me doing youth programming in Toronto. Some guy named Mike. I was born and raised in Toronto. I like sci-fi and dystopic books and films. 2 social work degrees from Toronto Metropolitan from just 10 and 11 years ago. I played hockey pretty much everywhere. And I'm a certified personal trainer with CanFit Pro. Not going to bore you with this slide. This was more of a personal organizing of thoughts. So, and now I have to minimize everyone. Okay. Yeah, so my study, I'm exploring the complex roles of hockey, which is absolutely inextricable from expressions of Canadian nationalism. And so what role does hockey play in the lives of the people of Lac-Seul, including people like myself who are in some ways diasporic, Lac-Seul band members, which I hadn't considered until somewhat recently, as to me, I feel more diasporic as an Estonian living in Canada, like because my mother is from the Baltics. Anyways, just interesting, that off-reserve themes and experiences and those kinds of positionalities as they relate to research. And next slide. Okay, excuse me. And the photo is, I believe, from 1949, and that would have been one of the first organized hockey teams at Pelican Lake Indian Residential School, which is in the town of Sulakaut, where my parents met in '78, and my father played hockey on future iterations of this hockey team in the '60s. I am the son of the October Stranger. My father wrote, and there's even a 15-minute short film called The October Stranger, my father. I am the grandson of Ashes, my grandfather's vision quest. It was a 10 or 11-day vision quest. I think in those days, they didn't necessarily do the 1, 2, or 3-day one. So, one day I'll do my vision quest in Lac-Seul, and it could happen soon in a future visit. But anyways, in his vision, he saw trees burning, just, maybe climate, for visions of climate issues with the earth. And Lac-Seul was flooded in the 30s. And anyways, Pinguio, I think, translates to ashes. And I'm proud to be the grandson of ashes. My dad's book, Indians Don't Cry, the sort of first part of my study title. So his book of short stories and poems anticipated, perhaps embodied future theories of visitors' survivance, where the post-Indian warrior, all of us who break free from these sort of, settler-imposed nationalisms and simulacra of indigeneity and expectations of indigeneity, those limiting ones that even temporarily can hold us up and and that. So a little bit of theory there. Not going to be talking too much theory today. Okay, so, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but it is important because based on interviews, based on knowledge, based on literature, archival records, the introduction of organized hockey in Lac Seul First Nation came by way of Pelican Lake Indian Residential School in December of '48. So that is our organized hockey creation story. I'll tell you why it's ironic a little bit later, but you can probably guess. Second distinct era of Lac Seul hockey is accompanied by the dawn of all First Nations community-based hockey. In 1974, Indian Friendship Centers play a tournament amongst themselves at the Sioux Lookout Memorial Arena. And let me just position Sioux Lookout for folks who maybe have never been or know where Sioux Lookout is. I'll take a second just to do that. Basically, I'll do it the same way the 1951 Sioux Lookout Blackhawks did, only on the sister train. So the former Dominion that goes across Canada with Via Rail is now called the Canadian, kind of a romanticized typical name. So that's what it is. Anyways, from Toronto's Union Station, that train travels in a northwestern direction, north of Lake Nipigon. It doesn't go through Thunder Bay anymore, but it goes really far, and it takes 27 hours. And I'm making this trip once more in November with a research team member on research related to pictographs in Lac Seul, do subsequent interviews. Anyways, Sioux Lookout, in short, is between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg in the northwest of Ontario. Anyways, so yeah, and the importance of community-based all First Nations hockey is related to First Nations hockey nationalisms as they are expressed nation specifically, but in our case, we're focusing on Lac Seul hockey. The third era, post 2000 to the present, marks an era where Lac Seul athletes navigate mainstream hockey systems, community-based hockey systems, and there's even some community-based tournaments that almost occupy both of those. The National Aboriginal Hockey Championships for minor, around 16, 17, 18 years old, the top Canadian male and female hockey players gather annually for that. Very important for those who pursue elite amateur, junior, college, and maybe pro. Okay, that was a mouthful. Research questions. I'm going to glance over this quick because I do want to get to more practical, praxis-related chit chats. So the obviously the role of hockey in residential school. Again, I'll talk about the provenance, native provenance, as Visner captures in a minute about our hockey creation story. Again, excuse me, emergence of community-based hockey in 70 and 71. What's the importance of First Nations hockey nationalisms, particularly if, you know, the singularity of settler Canada's hockey nationalisms don't, you know, it's one of the things I draw on is that it's just like, hey, Indigenous, First Nations, you know, imagery is desired, but the players are not. I know McKegney writes about that, and that's exactly the point. Anyways, and then yeah, just they're all related to the eras here. So like, what are the differences between mainstream hockey systems and community-based hockey systems? Because there are big differences, and they're perceived uniquely, depending on both people's positionalities, and that's to be expected. So that's what I'm exploring. We'll skip one there. I'm going to make this one quick, but you know, I for my literature review, which is the short version, is that it's temporally framed. It was the only way that I could possibly organize my thoughts. And I'll get to my organizing and coding and methods for writing in a minute, that are very experiential. But basically, placemaking on the shores of Lake Minong is in reference to an archaeological site near Thunder Bay, shores of Lake Minong, southeast shores, if I recall correctly. Anyways, my father is a trained anthropologist, and I'm working with him and a couple of great researchers out of England on the pictograph research I mentioned earlier. And he gifted me some, I think it's a chert rock. And I have one at my apartment in Montreal that I use for lighting medicines, and that grounds me. It just does. Anyways, artificial theories of Beringia, the Bering Strait theory, the BS theory. I kind of have some fun with that, and because that's the point. I'm making a placemaking point, a presence point, and if we scroll to it's over the doctrine and Indian Act and Royal Proclamation for now, but physical culture, Abenaki snowshoe innovations and contributions to Canadian physical culture, snowshoes are everywhere. They're in gift shops and thing like that. And that's some of the point that I'm making is Indigenous physical culture contributions. Moving right along to on my left here, sport systems in Canada, right? The Indigenous Canadian Sport Report citation is Heritage 2005. There's a point towards the end where it's just the first ever mention of First Nation, Métis, Inuit, Indian, Aboriginal, right? All those sometimes politically loaded, imposed names. The first mention of anything Indigenous in Sport Canada was in 72. So it's well, why? As the system sometimes failing, First Nations, Métis, Inuit athletes and pathways to elite amateur hockey and sport. What that emphasizes the importance of community-based hockey and sport system. Anyways, and at the bottom, Makwa and Dede, me and Dad, Pelican. Laxwell hockey theory, another sort of theory, heavy-ish slide. So Laxwell's hockey creation story begins at Pelican in December 1948, informed by Visner's theories of survivance and his cultural criticism, specifically of native provenance. Hockey was deployed to assimilate us, yet ironically became a sacred practice of what de Certeau frames as the poetic practices of daily life, right? So hockey, we fell in love with it, even in a place and a game that was designed to assimilate and eradicate cultural genocide. Methodologically, as Anishinaabe story weaving is a method that I'm crafting at the moment, and it's based on principles such as story weaving through life writing and honoring the non-linear and disruptive, right, of métissage as life writing, as a life writing method, right? So, weaving of stories was kind of the inspiration for this title. And if I'm being completely honest, we used to watch the Don Cherry hockey movies when VHS tapes when we were growing up playing hockey, and Dougie Gilmore weaving some magic. It just, for me, is important to incorporate myself into something such as this, that on Cherry, he was part of the problem for singular hockey nationalisms. I get it, but it's complicated. It always is. Anishinaabe story weaving, drawing from Witanui and Indigenous autoethnography, resistance-based discourses, reactivating ancestral storytelling. It's nothing more than storytelling passed down from my father to me, right? But I'll ground it academically because it's great and it makes sense. Indigenous photo elicitation, hot off the press, with Giancarlo Janice Forsyth, Taylor McKee, some of my colleagues and friends, is using stories to like retell retell history, and I have lots and lots of photos that I will undoubtedly be engaging in this, identifying player names, people in photos. Like it's really gonna be something, this November trip. Anyways, last but not least, Hanar's method of Carrere, unbelievable curriculum theory based, the archaeology of self, the interrelatedness of the trans-temporal and the trans-conceptual. It takes a while to sit with some of what this particular method does, but I really enjoy it, and I'm gonna go to the next slide. Okay, well, target population wise, current and former Laxwell hockey players, clearly. Incidentally, my last tournament as a player, so I played in the 2023 tournament where the first interviews for my study took place. My last tournament as a player, as a defender, is going to be at March 2024's tournament, where the window for interviewing participants closes a week or two afterwards. So November, trip to Northern Ontario, and March trip to Northern Ontario are huge. And I'm not nervous anymore to go back, but I was this past March because playing was kind of stressful. Pardon my tangent. Tournament team organizers and builders. We're the builders, right? It's not all about players and athletes. Case in point, family, friends, and fans. And yeah, just as a kind of what for my studies ethics submission, right? So it's like the Laxwell hockey community sort of occupies a space of being a community of interest per the Tri-Council policy statement too, where little to no risk of harm to the community and people in community, right? Which is obviously important because of the hockey community being a subset of participants that actually live in various regions in Northwestern Ontario. Okay. Yeah, so data sources and as sort of the praxis of story gathering in this case. Yeah, Kovacs's conversation method is something that I'm intending to deploy, flush out, and I think well, it falls in line with what I'm intending to do here. Oral history, oral knowledge transmission, Indigenous paradigm aligned, and contains tenets of collectivism. Yeah. Supplemental data sources. So there's happens to be like decent, actually pretty decent archival records either through on my right, the Library Archives of Canada, which I'll be visiting in around October 25th. And in that case, you have to pre-order, so look out education records, sport records, equipment lists. Anyways, that's just what I have to do. Go to Ottawa for that. And I had a really lovely visit to the Anglican Church of Canada archives in Toronto, Church in Bloor, just east of Bloor and Yonge. And the archivist was just really, really, really lovely, and to the point that yeah, I'll donate my resulting dissertation to such archives as the community, and even the Hockey Hall of Fame. I will, and that's on a later slide. So anyways, the photo on the left here, courtesy of Algoma Archives Jane Simpson collection, they say is from 1920 to 36. That would be, I think, that is Pelican in the background. So that's probably one of the first hockey photos that even predates where my sort of first period starts, because that was organized hockey specifically. But there is pre 1948 hockey evidence. So all that. Hey, anybody can stop me anytime if I'm going over time. I'm not actually don't have too much to go, so I'm always I have no problem sort of speeding up or getting out of the way. But this not on this slide because basically in my master's, I literally cut and pasted all well, at the time I had 7 participants, and that was how I identified themes and sub-themes and different nodes. It's working right now for really pushing my thesis proposal, literature review theory methods chapters, a study intro through. I think that everybody would benefit. Anybody can benefit from doing this. It kind of takes a lot of time, but it's really active. And all the post-its and all like the weaving of themes and organizing things temporally. Then you make a mind map and eventually the words just come out. So yeah, and I'd love to talk about this with anyone, anytime in more depth. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Oh, juxtapositions of academic rigor. Yeah, I just kind of had some fun with this slide because it just jumped out at me that I think from an Anishinaabe worldview perspective, the maintenance of strong relationships. And for me, it's really important to optimize my time spent. So it's going to be like a full month in Lac Seul, Sioux Lookout, and Thunder Bay. Like that is important because the more time you spend, you know, back home, community, relationship, trust building, that's very important. Ongoing self-reflexive practices, of course, are important. Journaling, and that's built into my method, right? Like that qualitative researchers memoing and journaling and note keeping, note taking on a napkin at a wedding, temporarily framing my lit review, which I did. Anyways, Western lens might prioritize more the saturation of peer-reviewed literature and primary sources, news articles from the 51 Blackhawks, whatever. Like, that's great. That makes sense. I'll do that, and I have lots more to add to my sort of academic articles as well. So, not out of the woods yet. Contribution of new knowledges and dissemination of, again, quote unquote, new knowledges. Ethics and praxis. So I am at an advantage being the son of a Lac Seul band member, published author, playwright, my father, George Kenny. But at the same time, reaching out to the education authority, getting like a letter of support from the education authority has helped with applying to scholarships and ensuring that those connections are still strong, even if I've lived in Toronto and Montreal most of my life. Contacting the captain of the Lac Seul Tomahawks prior to sending out feelers and initial correspondences related to my study on the Facebook team group chat. Some players I've played with in the past, other new younger players, sons of fathers I played with. Yeah, so just being tactful, obviously, and respectful about all that. Same thing with the skill of timing. After our first game in March, I reach under the bench of my stall in the dressing room to pull out like study info questionnaire and consent forms. I look around. No one notices what I'm doing, and I'm looking around and I'm like, this isn't the time. Put those forms away and be here in the dressing room with your teammates and wait. Because I didn't and I couldn't have my sort of researcher's agenda interfere with winning, right? Establishing friendships and forging new ones. That's it. And so it helped me because I took pressure off myself. And I was stressed. I hadn't been up to Sioux Lookout and Lac Seul in like 11 years. That's how quote unquote busy I've been. So I'm excited to go back in November, clearly, and in a good place in every way. Just really quickly here, the 27-hour train to Sioux Lookout, I mentioned that. Wonderful for, it's like time travel because you're traveling in a way that previous generations were more, obviously that was the only way at one point, but you just do it sometime. I went to Sioux Lookout or go all the way to Vancouver. It's really great. You can get a sleeper, and meals, and shower access. It's not bad. book early and save money. Anyways, spending more time in the North prioritizes in-person conversations, which I would say are better than Zoom calls, but I had a really great Zoom call with a teammate a few months ago. And incidentally, wellness programming opportunities. I'm bringing my hockey gear. I'll ask my teammates and the leaders, like, do we want to do a hockey clinic? Do we want to do wellness programming? Want to talk digital minimalism? Being there is the first step. Hey, we're getting there. I'm almost done. Again, stop me if I'm just on a roll, but we're almost there. Hey, you know what? From a prescribed gender roles lens, there were historically, and there may still be fewer opportunities for women and young girls to play hockey. Residential school was no exception. You know, boys were doing labor in field, and I've got an archive photo of a young fellow like driving a tractor around, right? Like, and my mother recalled, it was like they treated us like maids. They were treating us to be maids, right? Like, so fewer sports opportunities means fewer female participation that are eligible for my study. But I do know of two women who did play. One of them's my cousin, so that I'll reach out to her, absolutely, right? And my aunt, who has worked at the tournament and even got to play goalie in one of the schools many years ago. So, you know, it's all super meaningful, and it's just something I am naming, and I can turn folks on to specialists such as Deborah McGregor, who's at the University of Toronto in, I believe, environmental geography. Could be wrong about that. Kaylee Armstrong, granddaughter of the late, great George Armstrong, and my friend, who's, I believe, doing young girls and women's hockey in residential school. So wonderful to hear about that. Really quick limitation. The singularity of Lac-Seul hockey nationalism, right? Our experience, folks who grew up in the North, their hockey experience is different from Pikanchicum because they're much more remote, right? And Lac-Seul's proximity to Lookout, and even Thunder Bay, the proximity to minor hockey systems, all kind of contributes to to some of the reasons why Lac-Seul became very strong and dominant in hockey. Anyways, nationalisms, advantages and disadvantages of participation, really quickly, obviously contribute to the preservation and growth, right, of Lac-Seul and Lac-Seul hockey. The cathartic potential of deployment of conversation method for participant interviews, and my position, right? I'm a hockey person from the community on Dad's side, and so, and then just importantly, though, I don't want to just gloss over this, the potential of being triggered for really negative reliving of things that may or may not have happened in residential school among survivors, any negative experience with hockey. So that the praxis aspect of what I'm about to say is that, yeah, I have mental health and youth support, like phone numbers and emails, like on my consent form. But if a moment occurs when someone is actually in like serious distress, it's not like give participant paper and that's it. So that's just the point I'm making there, is go like the extra distance, see about navigating, whether it's mental health or counseling support. Anyways, I just want to make that point because it's very important. Knowledge sharing, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to gift the dissertation, of course, to Lac-Seul and the archives there, the Hockey Hall of Fame, the Library Archives of Canada, and the Anglican Canadian National Archives. Knowledge exchange, so learning about customs, protocols, and ceremonies from Lac-Seul, in part from my dad, but also from elders and teammates, friends, and everyone back home. It's going to be something else. Then my intention of, sharing sport knowledge, training knowledge, wellness knowledge, employment, whatever, academia. Just sharing. You learn lots and you give it all back. I'm working with my dad, this last point here, on a graphic novel. It's going to be pretty something. I'll be interviewing with an Indigenous journalist and university professor in end of November, early December. It's going to be really intense. But I told my father that I'm ready to sit there and swap stories with you and support you. And so it's a wonderful, meaningful project that will help to keep such legacies alive. And we're going to be putting it out there, our stories and stuff. So it's intense. The jersey on the left is a jersey I donated to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And they were really nice to display it. It's still there. This was the World Championship year in review. Now it's in the World of Hockey section. So my second donation, or technically third, will be the, I don't know, maybe I'll donate the dissertation to the Hall of Fame. I haven't fully decided yet. Thank you. I know I went over 20 minutes. I'm terrible with time. And reach out anytime and look forward to the follow-up discussion. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Mike. I've got to get to know you in the last year, and your presentation is just you. It's like the way you present things. I really feel like I get to have access to that, a sense that of who you are, and the closer it is to your heart, the more focused you are on your presentation. And it's like I feel it, like I'm getting engaged in the material.
That's really lovely. Thank you for that. Yeah, no, that was that's really kind of you. Thanks.
And I really also love how a lot of your approaches are really decolonized. Like you've put an extra effort in really using different language and integrating, Indigenous worldviews, even like in rigor. I found that really interesting. I've never saw this, so thank you so much for this.
Here, I have just following up on Mike's. I'm going to start the questions. We have a Q&A now. So feel free to, open your video and raise your hand for any questions. Mike, in your presentation at one point you mentioned, I have to add this, academic. I'll have to add this academic thing to what I do, but I'm really just, storytelling or sharing stories with my dad. And I was just going to emphasize that, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes we forget in academic, context that is research. That is a way of doing research, because we're that's part of the whole decolonial or the paradigm shifting, because we're constantly being confronted with, you need to use this theory and that top-down type of thing, when what's coming from your research participants can start to constitute the theory in itself. And one of my research supervisors always said that too. You don't have to necessarily go searching for it. You use that to back up some of the things that you're doing. Yeah, that was all.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for that.
Donc, je veux juste ouvrir le Q&A. S'il y a des gens qui ont des questions
I'd
pour
just
nos...
like to start the Q&A. If anyone has any questions for our panelists, I see that Nicolas was also asking if your PowerPoint would be available. So that's really up to you as well.
Pour ma part, je sais pas.
So
Faudrait
for
que
my part, I'd have to think about it. I had to think about it. Me too, me too. So in all cases, Nicolas, the presentations will be available on our social media because we're recording it. So you will be able to refer to it in the future. Otherwise, if there are other questions about the presentations, next steps.
Et je pense que ah, il est plus là. J'ai vu qu'il y avait une question tout à l'heure, mais
I saw there was a question earlier, but
I see Nicolas a une question là.
Nicholas has a question.
Ouais.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question, but he says he's very much interested in ethics of collaboration and the references you've made. I guess that's for Mike. And Jesse.
Ethics of collaboration and references you've made. Yeah, so I didn't academically flesh out like the the community engagement and that, but yeah, like it's such an interesting question too, because it's like, how long have I battled with not feeling legitimate by having grown up in Toronto, and now and like suddenly like, hey, showing up to Lac School, I'm gonna play hockey, I'm pretty good, George Kenny's son. And so it's like, but to me, anything to do with like Indigenous research ethics, it's like there's a standard of like excellence, and at the risk of like saying perfectionism, that it actually requires, but it's not anything higher or above than what any like research sort of like ethical practice or approach would like not want to aspire to, right? And it just, I don't know, and it's like, I get the letter of support and like, oh, we're really interested in Mike's Lac School hockey history study, and it's early iterations and stuff. But it's like, I don't like communicate back and forth even with anyone specifically, but I'm foot in the door guy because I have my pre-existing relationship. And then it's incumbent on me to go there and spend time and not just leave as soon as the hockey tournament's over, so those are the kinds of things that are so important. And as hockey becomes less important in my life, it's good because I don't have to just be hockey Mike, hockey is just the stage, for what I'm doing, right? And it's a compelling one. We got a rink in the community. Anyway, I'd love to hear from Jesse as well. So.
Moi, en ce qui concerne.
So for me, with regard to collaboration, there are those who might say it's an advantage, others might say it's a disadvantage. But for me, when I started my project, the big project that I was talking about was already, going on, and the community had already been picked. They knew that there was going to be a study on with the students that had participated in the vocational training, delocalized vocational training. For me personally, I didn't have to solicit the communities to see if it was in their needs, if it was a research that could be pertinent for them. It was done before by my research director. However, with regard to the planning for my collection of data, it was me that was in relationship with the directors of ERRSA who are in the participating Indigenous communities. And in certain cases, I myself can get into contact with the students to plan, if there are individual meetings, or if they give their permission or give the permission of the ERRSA contact to give their information. I'm still at the start, but I haven't really been in the communities other than in Ganawagi. So that's probably what I would offer on that as a response, but it's important to me to know that everyone is happy and that we can improvise, because if I spend 3 days there and then it turns out that the improvisation is also very helpful when it's spontaneous, and often we get better results, but it's also important to not impose the timing and how it's done, and that's it. My pleasure.
Est-ce qu'on a une autre question?
Do we have any other questions? Any comments? Please don't be shy. Ms. Mariev. Hi, thank you for your presentations and for sharing your experiences with us in Indigenous research. It's very appreciated. I have a question for Jesse. So you touched upon the concept of cultural security, and I wanted to know how you integrate it into your project and what is the link with the pedagogy? Well, actually, I touched on the concept briefly because the goal of my research is not to do a training on cultural security for teachers. It's more to have an idea of how the students themselves, how they perceive their cultural security. I've noticed, understood when I was speaking with people that for students who have done their primary and secondary school in the community, that are doing their vocational training in the community, that when we talk about cultural security, they don't really understand, because they rarely have lived discrimination. They grew up in the community. They felt safe and with the people. And so to put that concept as a priority in the research, I felt like I might not get any data, because if we ask them what value to give to cultural safety in the training, if they don't know what the opposite is, then they can't really answer that question. So it'll be interesting to see if these students give any importance to the level of training that the non-Indigenous people that are doing the training in the communities, that how well trained they are in cultural security, or how well versed they are in the history and with Indigenous pedagogy. So those are kind of the results that I want to go and get that will be integrated into the research. There will probably be a module on the cultural security that will follow. So it's more about that vision, integrating that vision without it being a key concept in the research. That is a very good detailed answer. That also has a lot of makes a lot of sense in the way you explain it. Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Ariane, often when you turn on your camera, it's because you got something you want to say. No, I don't really have anything to put forward, but I just wanted to mention that this is our ethics committee that has evaluated this project. So I found it really great to hear news and see where it's going, and to hear Jesse talk about it. I turned on my camera because we were in the question period, and that was it. No, that's okay. So I didn't want to put you on the spot. Well, great. Thank you. Congratulations. Great project. Thank you. Well, listen, if we don't have any other questions, I'd just like to remind you that it's really important for us that you If you have time to fill out the evaluation questionnaire at the end of the session, it allows us to adjust ourselves and to have to know if the work that we did is pertinent for people who are participating in the webinar. So if you want to take a few minutes to complete the form, my colleague Sherry just shared it in the chat. And in all of the cases, I'd like to thank you for being here. Thank you to the panelists who in less than a month will participate in the gathering, the national gathering of students, the graduate students. So it's a gathering for students, Indigenous students, in the second and third cycle of postdoctorate, who that will take place in Sydney and Mi'kmaq territory in Nova Scotia. For them, it'll be a little practice for them before that event, and we'll see each other in about a month for the next webinar. Will take place on October 18th. So thank you to our interpreter. Thank you.
Passez une belle journée.
Have a great day, everybody.